Before we dive deep into this video, I want to ask you one simple question. Do you think that the United Nations is currently representing the ongoing geopolitical realities in their true sense? Now, I want you to watch this entire video and stay till the very end with me and then comment your thoughts. And also, if you're new to our YouTube channel, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you do not miss our new videos. So, in a surprising move, India, in its recent interim budget, has cut down its funding to the UN. The fact that it has cut down its funding to the UN is not surprising. What is surprising is the fact that it has cut down the funding by not 5%, by not 10%, by not even 20%, but by over 50%. And to be precise, 54.25%. Now, when you cut down the funding of an institution, of an international body, significantly by over 50%, that tells us that you want to send them a clear message, that you are unhappy with something that is going on. So what is it exactly that India is unhappy about? What is it that India does not really like that is going on at the UN? And what message does India want to send with this reduction in its funding to the UN? We are going to cover everything in this video here. Now, before we dive deep and answer those questions, let us understand the numbers. So, India this year in its interim budget for 2024-25 has put forward a total budget of 558.12 crore rupees for all of its funding to international bodies. Now, this includes the UN, but is not limited to the UN. It also includes other international bodies. For last year's budget, this number was about 866.7 crore rupees, or about $104 million. So this is a clear reduction in the contributions to international bodies by 35%. So India has not just cut down its funding to the UN, but international bodies as a whole. But here's where things get interesting. Last year, when we look at the budget allocated towards the UN, it was about 382.54 crore rupees, or about $46 million. That was last year. And this year, that amount has been reduced to 175 crore rupees, or about $21 million. Now let us understand why has India cut down its funding to the UN by over 50%. India has been calling for reforms at the UN for a long time, specifically at UN's most important wing, which is the UNSC, or the United Nations Security Council. And the UNSC is responsible for maintaining peace throughout the world. It is also responsible for establishing security in all the regions of the world. Not only that, but the UN also sends peacekeeping forces to volatile areas, to areas that are largely affected by violence. And the UNSC also decides on imposing sanctions. And these sanctions are economic, military, as well as diplomatic sanctions. Now, let us understand the permanent countries that are part of the United Nations Security Council. So, there are 5 permanent members of the UN, and these include the United States of America, the United Kingdom, formerly known as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the Russian Federation, and the People's Republic of China. Why does India want a permanent seat at the UNSC? We have already established the importance of UNSC and how powerful of a wing of the UN it is. When we talk about India, India is the most populated country in the world, with a population of 1.4 billion people, and the population is only increasing. Now, this population makes up about 17.7% of the total global population. So, our population, the Indian population, is a huge chunk of the global population. Not only that, but India is also the 5th largest economy in the world, with a GDP, or gross domestic product, of $3.7 trillion. And India is going to be the 3rd largest economy in the world in the next few years. In terms of economy, it is only behind the US, China, Germany, and Japan. The UN as an organization was formed after the Second World War in 1945. And at that point of time, India was still under the British rule. It was not an independent country. So times have changed. India is way different. India is a totally different country at this point of time as compared to what it was in 1945, even when it got its independence in 1947. However, in 2024, India is not only the most populated country in the world, but India's stature as an upcoming power is also growing. Not only that, but when we look at the entire globe, the UNSC does not simply represent the whole world in its true sense, nor are the members, the permanent members, able to relate to the issues of the developing countries in a better way. India, on the other hand, is the voice of the global south. India is emerging as the leader of the global south. And by the global south, I mean Latin America, Africa, the Caribbean islands, the Asian countries that are not developed countries. So India is representing the developing world as a whole at this point of time. From its status as a low income country to now pacing towards becoming a middle income country, India at this point is at the right place and at the right time to become a permanent member at the UNSC. Not only that, but when you look at the contributions, the total number of contributions by India to the UN, India has sent over 200,000 military and police personnel to the UN in the last 70 years. And not only that, currently it is the third largest troop provider to the UN with 6,073 personnel being deployed. In comparison, when we look at two of the permanent members of the UNSC, China and France, China deploys about 20 to 67 personnel, and on the other hand, France deploys about 587 personnel. So you see, comparing the number of troops that India is sending is way more than the personnel that these permanent members are sending. Not only that, but India contributes about 10% to the total UN peacekeepers of 66,839 personnel. Also, Indian forces have been a part of 49 out of 71 UN peacekeeping missions since 1948. Times have changed. We are no longer living in times of the Second World War. We are no longer living in the times of a superpower divide between the US and the USSR, or the US being the sole superpower of the world. We are living in times where the US's superpower status is being constantly challenged by China. China is trying to take over the US as the superpower. On the other hand, when you look at India, India is not taking sides here. When we look at the geopolitical situation today with what is going on in the world, India is not taking sides. India has positioned itself as a neutral nation. Despite positioning itself as a neutral nation, countries around the world, they are still interested in partnering up with India. India is not being forced to take a side because India can now say the things that other countries cannot. India has been positioning itself as that country which is not backing down to the pressure and the forces of the superpowers of the world. So the global power dynamics are changing, and this is exactly why there need to be some reforms at the UN as well. However, the UNSC boards 5 permanent members with veto powers. Now, what do I mean by veto powers? So if any of these 5 members do not like a particular discussion taking place at the UNSC, if any of these 5 members are not in agreement to anything that is being discussed or anything that has been voted upon, they can simply use their veto power to shut it down. So they have this powerful veto weapon. And this is exactly why India needs to be at the table as a permanent member, because India will be able to represent the current geopolitical situations of the world in a much better way. When we look at all of these countries, these are those countries that do not understand the developing nations in a better light. As a non-permanent member, India was last elected at the UNSC in June 2020. It was India's 8th time being elected at the UN, and this opportunity came after a gap of 10 years. Now that we've discussed why India wants to be a permanent member at the UNSC, let us understand why it has not been able to become a permanent member. Which countries do not want India to become a part of the UNSC and why? So, as discussed earlier, there are 5 permanent members at the UN, and if any of those 5 members they use their veto power, any discussion or agreement simply shuts down. And this is exactly what is happening when it comes to India wanting to join as the permanent member of the UNSC. Even if one of these permanent members they reject the idea, they veto India becoming a permanent member of the UNSC, that position simply gets rejected. And this is exactly why India has not been able to secure a permanent position at the UNSC. In this context, we are talking about one country which does not get along really well with India, and that is China. All of the permanent members of the UNSC, they're on board with India becoming a permanent member, but China simply does not want India to be there. So, why does China not want India to become a permanent member of the UNSC? One of the major reasons is the fact that India and China, they've had their border dispute for decades and decades now. And this border dispute does not seem to have an end to it in sight right now. Not only that, but many countries around the world, they are seeing India as an alternate to China. Many of the Western companies, they're moving their production units from China to India. And China is not liking the growing geopolitical influence of India on the world. It is not liking the fact that other countries want to partner up with India, that international companies, they want to establish their manufacturing units in India. So this is exactly why China does not want India to become a permanent member of the UNSC. Here's what India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said. India will get the UN Security Council seat, but not easily. We will get there. I'm 100% certain we will get there. But I will also tell you that honestly, we will not get it easily because the world is full of competition. I asked you a question at the beginning of this video. Do you really think that the UN is currently representing the geopolitical realities in its true sense? Please let me know what you think about that in the comments below. And also, do you think that India is going to become a permanent member of the UNSC anytime soon? If you enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. Thank you for watching this video and have a great day.